What happens when the rivers that built Europe no longer carry enough water to reliably carry the ships designed to cruise them? That question sounds dramatic, but it's increasingly important for anyone considering a future Rhine or Danube river cruise. I'm not saying that these rivers are disappearing, and I'm not suggesting that river cruising is coming to an end. What I am saying is that low water periods are becoming more visible, and it's becoming a bigger part of the travel conversation. And travelers need to understand what the numbers actually mean. Because a headline that says the Rhine is only 14 centimeters deep is usually wrong. A gauge reading is not the total depth of the river. It is a measurement relative to a local reference point. Every gauge has its own zero, and every riverbed has its own geometry and its own navigational threshold. So today I want to put on my professor hat for a moment and explain the geography behind low water on the Rhine and the Danube, what happened during the summer of 2025, and what the 2026 data is already telling us, and what all this could mean for the future of European river cruising. I'm Angela Hughes. I'm CEO of Trips and Ships Luxury Travel, and I'm an adjunct professor of geography and travel and tourism, and I've traveled to more than 121 countries. Let us begin with the most important idea. Low water is not a one-time European event. The Rhine is about 1,230 kilometers long. Its flow is influenced by alpine snow, glaciers, rainfalls, tributaries, and water coming through the Lake Constance system. It's one of Europe's most extensively used commercial waterways. And for river cruising, one of the most watched locations is Kaub, K-A-U-B, in Germany. Kaub sits along a shallow and narrow section of the Middle Rhine. That means one difficult stretch can affect a much longer itinerary, even if the river looks perfectly healthy in other locations. The Danube is a very different system. No two rivers are the same. It stretches roughly 2,850 kilometers from Germany toward the Black Sea and crosses or borders 10 countries. It is fed by a huge, varied drainage basin. Conditions on the upper Danube in Germany can be very different from conditions around Budapest, and both can be very different from the lower Danube near Serbia, Bulgaria, and Romania. And that distinction matters. When someone says the Danube is low, my next question is, well, which part of the Danube is low? This graph compares days in 2025 when water at 5 important gauges were at or below the local low navigation reference level. We are using days below the local threshold instead of raw centimeters because centimeters at one gauge cannot be fairly compared with centimeters at another. Look at the geographic contrast. At Silistra on the lower Danube, water was at or below the low navigational reference for all 31 days in July. At Novo Selo, also on the lower Danube, it happened on 28 of the 31 days. At Felling on the upper Danube, it was 15 days. Budapest recorded 5 days. But at Kaub on the Rhine, the official daily data shows 0 days or below its 77 centimeter navigation reference. The lowest daily value in July was 96 centimeters. So the biggest summer 2025 impacts in this comparison were not evenly distributed across Europe. They were concentrated on the lower Danube. That is the lesson I want travelers to remember. A bad season on one section of one river does not automatically describe an entire continent or even the whole length of that river. Now let us move on and look at what's most important in 2026. Copernicus reported below average river flows affecting parts of the Rhine and the Danube regions in May, June, and July. And in July, Rhine discharge reached record low territory within the 1992 to 2026 comparison period, while sections of the Danube were at record or near record lows. At Kaub, the official gauge recorded 6 centimeters on the evening of August 15th, below the previous officially listed low of 25 centimeters from October 2018. Again, that does not mean that the Rhine was 6 centimeters deep. It means that the gauge had fallen 6 centimeters above its local reference 0. The navigation consequence depends on the channel depth, the vessel, its draft, its load, and the safety margin required by the operator. Still, the reading is significant because it shows how far the gauge moved outside its previous historical range. That is why I do not want to frame this issue as one isolated, extremely hot summer. The more useful question is whether Europe is entering a period in which extremely low summer flows occur more often, last longer, or arrive with less warning. Climate change does not simply make every river lower every year. River systems are more complicated than that. Some years will be wet. Some will bring flooding. A river may even experience high water and low water within the same cruising season. The deeper concern is a change in timing and volatility. Warm winters can mean more precipitation falls as rain rather than snow. And snow can melt earlier, and that may increase water in winter or spring, but it can leave less stored mountain snow to support river flow during the hottest parts of the summer. High temperatures also increase evaporation and dry the soil. When rain finally arrives, very dry ground may absorb it before enough water reaches the river. Short, intense storms can also produce rapid runoff and flooding without creating the sustained flow that navigation needs a week later. In other words, the system can become more volatile in both directions, periods of excess water and periods of insufficient water. The first long-term impact is reliability, and river cruising depends on a chain of connected river segments, locks, bridges, docking locations, and ports. A ship does not need the entire river to be low. One shallow bottleneck can interrupt the route. The second impact is seasonality, but this needs nuance. Travelers sometimes assume that moving a cruise into spring or autumn automatically eliminates water risks. It does not. Spring can bring high water, flooding, stronger currents, or a bridge clearance problem. Autumn can still be dry after a hot summer. The third impact is itinerary design. Cruise companies may need to build more flexibility into schedules, use ships with shallower drafts, shorten certain route segments, or create products that do not depend on passing the most vulnerable bottlenecks. The fourth impact is economic. Lower water reduces how much cargo vessels can carry, which can increase transport costs. For cruise line, operational changes, hotel nights, transfers, ship swaps, and revised excursions all cost money. Greater climate variability influences pricing, insurance, fleet design, and where companies deploy their ships. And the fifth impact is travelers' perception of value. A river cruise is sold as a seamless experience in which the hotel travels with you. When the ship cannot complete the advertised route, even an effective contingency plan can feel different from the vacation that you might have imagined. And finally, there is destination impact. These rivers support ecosystems, agriculture, drinking water, energy production, freight, transport, local businesses, and communities. River cruising is only one part of a much larger geographic system. My advice is not to panic, and it's not to avoid river cruising. The Rhine and the Danube remain extraordinary ways to experience Europe. But the smartest travelers will make more informed choices. First, ask about the river segment, not just a river name. Amsterdam to Basel has different geographic risks from a lower Danube itinerary to the Black Sea. Second, understand the operator's contingency language. What happens if the low ship cannot pass a low water section? Can the company swap the ships, modify the itineraries, use hotels, or provide transportation around the affected areas? Third, consider your own tolerance for change, and this is a big one. Some travelers are comfortable with an altered itinerary as long as they still visit the major destinations. Others are booking specifically for the experience of sailing every single mile. Fourth, always purchase travel insurance for the risk it actually covers and read the policy. Low water does not automatically trigger every cancellation or interruption benefit. And fifth, work with an advisor who understands the geography, the ships, and the differences between the cruise lines. The goal is not to predict the exact river level months in advance. No one can do that reliably. The goal is to choose a product with a risk profile and contingency approach that fits you. The Rhine and Danube are not just scenic backdrops. They are living geographic systems responding to the temperature, rainfall, snow, drought, engineering, and human demand. Summer 2025 showed us that low water impacts can be highly regional, with the lower Danube experiencing much more persistent navigation pressure than Kaub on the Rhine during July. The 2026 readings show how quickly the picture can change and how historical extremes can also be surpassed. River cruising is not dying. It is entering a more climate variable era. For travelers, that means the future is not about fear. It is about better questions, realistic expectations, and smarter choices. If you found this helpful, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone considering a European river cruise. And if you would like help choosing the right river route, season, and cruise line for the way you travel, my team or me at Trips and Ships Luxury Travel would be delighted to help you. I'm Angela Hughes, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.